I was standing in the middle of a half-frozen pasture when I saw it, a three-story mansion sitting exactly where my father's cattle barn used to be. Not beside it, not near it, right on top of it, on my land. And the man who built it, the HOA president from the subdivision half a mile down the road, stood on the balcony sipping coffee like he owned the sunrise. I remember the wind stinging my eyes as I whispered to myself, "This can't be real." But it was. The property line markers were gone, my fences were bulldozed, and this man, this smug, smooth-talking community leader, had taken the one thing my father left me after he died: his land, his legacy, his lifeblood. I didn't know it then, but this discovery would drag me into a year of hell, a legal war, a personal war, and a slow unraveling of the truth about how far powerful people will go when they think no one will fight back. But first, I should tell you how it all began. My name is Daniel Rivers. I grew up on 68 acres of stubborn, uneven Texas soil that my father carved into a ranch with nothing but a second-hand tractor and the kind of grit you don't see much anymore. If you've ever woken up to the sound of cattle lowing just before dawn, or the diesel cough of an old tractor coming to life, you'll understand the rhythm I grew up in. Everything smelled like hay, leather, and fresh coffee. Even now, when I catch that mix anywhere else, something in my chest tightens, like Dad's still around. He passed 2 years before all this happened. Sudden heart attack. One minute he was teaching me how to mend barbed wire using his beat-up Leatherman, and the next, well, life doesn't ask permission before it breaks you. For weeks after the funeral, the ranch felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. No boots stomping mud off by the door. No humming. My dad always hummed while he worked. Old country tunes, barely recognizable but steady, warm. I would have given anything to hear that again, but losing him also gave me something unexpected. Resolve. I was going to keep the land running, for him. For the promise I made at his hospital bedside when the heart monitor was still screaming and my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't even hold his. "I'll take care of it, Dad," I told him. "I'll protect everything you built." At the time, I didn't understand how literal that promise would become. Running the ranch alone meant long nights, early mornings, and more mechanical failures than I could count. Fences breaking, irrigation clogging, coyotes getting too bold. Still, I loved it. The land had a pulse, and I learned how to feel it. I learned to read storms by the smell of the air. I learned which cows were troublemakers and which ones were practically pets. Every Friday, I'd sit on the porch, swing Dad built, and watch the sun melt into the horizon. He used to say, "A man's land is the only place where the sky feels like it belongs to him." But the peace never lasts, does it? Not in stories like this. Not in real life either. About 6 months after Dad died, the subdivision down the road expanded, Sage Creek Estates, a place where people pretended they lived in the country but still complained about dust and roosters. Their HOA was infamous even before I met them. Petty fines. Lawn inspections. Complaints about things that didn't even affect them. Still, I figured they'd stay on their side of the world. Wrong. When they elected Harold Whitford as the new HOA president, something shifted. I didn't know his name then. I didn't know the polished, smile, iron-fisted reputation he carried, or how many people in that community whispered about him when they thought he couldn't hear. All I knew was that every week, more construction trucks rumbled down roads that used to see nothing but my pickup and the occasional tractor. Something was growing, something big, and even though I didn't realize it yet, its shadow had already reached across my fences. It started small, so small I shrugged it off. A missing boundary marker, a survey stake pulled out, a patch of tire marks cutting across the back pasture. Little things, things I assumed were accidents. But late one evening, while I sat on that old porch swing listening to cicadas buzz like 1,000 tiny motors, I felt something I hadn't felt since Dad died. A warning, a tightening in my chest. Like the land itself was trying to tell me, pay attention, I didn't listen. Not yet, not soon enough. Because the real trouble wasn't coming from a loose fence or a survey line. It was coming from a man who believed rules didn't apply to him, especially property lines. 3 weeks later, I woke up to the sound of engines, not tractors, bulldozers. And when I stepped outside, still half asleep, I realized they were on my land. That was the moment my world tilted for the first time. The sound of those engines cut through the morning like someone tearing fabric. Low, mechanical growls, angry, deliberate. Bulldozers don't purr. They announce themselves like they're proud of the destruction they're about to cause. I stepped out onto the porch barefoot. The boards were still cold with night air, and I remember thinking how strange it was that I could feel the chill in my feet, but not in my hands. My hands were shaking too hard. 2 bright yellow machines crawled across my lower pasture, flattening knee-high winter grass under metal treads. Dust rose around them like smoke. I shouted, "Hey, you're on private property!" Neither operator even turned his head. That was my first real clue that this wasn't a mistake. I threw on boots, grabbed my truck keys, and drove down the slope toward them fast enough to fishtail in the dirt. By the time I got close, a white SUV was idling near the fence line, the temporary fence I'd strung up after that last windstorm. A man stepped out before I even shifted into park. Tall, clean-shaven, expensive vest over a button-up shirt that didn't belong anywhere near heavy machinery. He didn't flinch when I slammed my door. "Morning," he said, casual as if we were neighbors sharing coffee. "What the hell are your guys doing on my property?" I snapped. He didn't answer. He just extended a manicured hand. "Harold Whitford, HOA President of Sage Creek Estates." I didn't shake it. "I don't care if you're the President of the United States," I said. "Your equipment is trespassing. Shut it down." Harold smiled, a slow, patronizing thing that told me he'd heard versions of this conversation before and always walked away winning. "Oh, Daniel," he said, as if we were old friends. "This is all just a misunderstanding. According to our updated development maps, this section falls inside the expansion zone." I stared at him stunned. "Expansion zone? I own this land. It's been in my family for 50 years. "Right," he said, checking something on his clipboard. "But after the county's boundary review, the lines shifted approximately—" He tapped the page. "30 yards east." He pointed east, toward my barn, toward my father's workshop, toward the heart of the property. "And you didn't think to tell me?" I asked, voice rising. "We sent notices," he said with a shrug. "If you didn't see them, that's on you." I stepped closer. "Turn them off." But Harold didn't. He just gave that same serene, smug smile and said, "Daniel, I'm just trying to bring value to the community. You'll thank me later." I didn't thank him. I threatened to call the sheriff, and that was the first time I saw the real Harold, the one hiding under the polite HOA mask. His jaw tightened. His eyes sharpened. He didn't yell, but his voice dropped low, almost like a warning. "You might want to reconsider making this difficult." Then he turned, waved his hand, and the bulldozers kept moving. That was the moment something inside me snapped. The realization that this wasn't a mix-up. This was a land grab. The first cracks in the life my father left me had appeared, and Harold was prying them wider. I called the sheriff's office twice. Both times the dispatcher told me they'd send someone when available. In a rural county, that basically means don't hold your breath. By noon, the bulldozers had scraped 2 long trenches across my north grazing field. Perfectly straight, perfectly deliberate, like they were marking territory. When I walked in front of one and forced it to stop, the operator killed the engine but never climbed out. He just sat there, avoiding eye contact like he'd been told not to engage. That's when I noticed the clipboard on the seat beside him, stamped with the Sage Creek HOA logo. HOAS don't issue construction orders. HOAS don't redraw property lines. HOAs don't hire bulldozers. Unless they're covering for someone who has money and ambition. Something much bigger was happening. Around 2 p.m., a deputy finally showed up. Deputy Grayson, mid-60s, mustache, the kind of man who looked like he should be leaning against the counter at a feed store, not wearing a badge. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked, even though the issue was visible from half a mile away. "This is my land," I said. "They're trespassing." Harold stepped forward before I could say more. "Deputy, good to see you." Grayson nodded at him. Too familiar, too comfortable. I didn't like it. Harold explained his side, quickly, smoothly, confidently, and somehow turned the entire conversation into me being uncooperative. By the end, the deputy sighed and said, "Look, Daniel, this sounds like a civil dispute. Can't shut down construction unless someone's in immediate danger. Best take it up with the county survey office. So you're not going to stop them?" He shook his head. "Not today." Harold gave me that small, triumphant nod, the kind men give when they've rigged the game long before you even saw the board. Then the deputy climbed back in his car and drove away, leaving me alone with the machines tearing into everything I had left of my father. I felt helpless. I felt betrayed. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Fear. What would happen if the bulldozers reached the old barn? My father built that barn with his bare hands. The beams still had pencil marks from when I was a kid, and he'd let me help measure things. I couldn't lose it. I wouldn't. So I did the one thing I thought would force Harold's hand. I parked my truck in front of the bulldozer path. Stupid? Maybe. But desperate men don't weigh options. They act. Harold stormed over, mask slipping again. "You're making a mistake," he hissed. "No," I said quietly. "You are." He stared at me for a long, tense second, his jaw flexing. Then he turned away. "Everyone take a break," he shouted to the operators. "We'll resume tomorrow." Just like that, the machines shut off, not because of the law, not because of respect, because I'd become an inconvenience, and Harold had a plan he wasn't ready to show yet. That night, as I walked the property lines with a flashlight, I found something in the dirt, a fresh wooden survey stake. It wasn't placed by the county, it wasn't placed by me. It marked a line 40 yards into my land. And attached to it was something worse, a construction blueprint. And on that blueprint, in clean black ink, was the outline of a mansion. Right. On my property. The blueprint felt heavier than paper, heavier than ink, heavier than anything I'd held since the day I folded my father's death certificate and tucked it into a drawer I couldn't open for months. I shined the flashlight over the page again. The design wasn't rough sketches or conceptual drafts. It was finished, detailed, stamped with city approval codes. A 9,300 square foot estate home, 6 bedrooms, indoor pool, 4-car garage, and a long winding driveway that cut straight through my father's old pecan grove. The blueprint said one thing loud and clear. They weren't planning to take my land. They already believed they owned it. I didn't sleep at all, not even a minute. I sat on the porch, blueprint on my lap, replaying the day over and over. I imagined my father pacing beside me. He always paced when he thought, slow, steady, boots thudding against wood like a metronome. "What would you do, Dad?" I whispered into the dark. The wind didn't answer. It just pushed dead leaves across the yard, scraping softly. My dog, Ringo, rested his head on my knee, sensing my panic. Somewhere down the road, a construction generator hummed. They hadn't shut everything off. The sound crawled through the night like a warning, By dawn, my fear had hardened into something else: resolve. If Harold wanted a fight, he picked the wrong man. The next morning, I drove straight into town to the county survey and deeds office. The place smelled like stale paper, old coffee, and bureaucracy, the three natural scents of slow-moving government. Behind the counter sat a woman named Linda, who'd worked there since I was in middle school. She looked up over her glasses and said, "Mornin', Daniel. You look like someone stole your tractor." "Worse," I said. "I need the official boundary records for my ranch. Fast." She typed slowly, painfully slowly, but eventually the records came up. She printed them, handed them to me. The lines were exactly where they had always been. No shifts, no adjustments, no expansions. "This is the only version?" I asked. "Yes, sir," she said. "Hasn't changed since your father updated the deed in 1999. My heart pounded in my throat. "Then why?" I asked carefully. "Did the Sage Creek HOA tell me the boundary moved 30 yards east?" Linda frowned. "HOA. Daniel, HOAs have zero authority over county lines." "That's what I thought." "And no request for a line adjustment has ever come through here," she added. "I'd know. Trust me." My hands shook around the papers. "Linda, something's wrong." She leaned close, lowered her voice. "Don't deal with that HOA president alone. He's been here before." She hesitated. "He's persuasive." "Persuasive? How?" Before she could answer, her coworker walked in, breaking the moment. Her eyes flicked toward the woman, then back to me. "Just be careful." That was the second warning I'd ignored. By the time I got back, the bulldozers were lined up again, engines off, but crews milling around like they were waiting for a green light. Harold's white SUV sat in the same spot. He saw me pull up. He smiled like a man greeting a guest at a charity event. "Daniel," he said lightly, "glad you're here. We need to talk." "No," I said firmly, "we really don't." He clasped his hands behind his back. "I'm trying to handle this neighbor to neighbor, but you're making things much harder than they need to be. Linda at the county office says the boundary hasn't moved an inch. You're lying." His smile didn't break, but the corners tightened. "Linda is misinformed," he said. "Our private surveyor—" "You mean the one you hired?" I shot back. Harold didn't flinch. "A certified surveyor. You're welcome to hire your own if you wish, but the land shift is legally recognized." I laughed. I actually laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Then show me the paperwork," I said. He paused. "It's being processed." "Show me the paperwork." He exhaled through his nose like he was losing patience. "Daniel, we're building a beautiful development here. Property values will soar. Your land will become exponentially more valuable. You should be grateful." "My land is valuable because my father bled for it," I said, "not because some HOA dictator wants a mansion." His expression changed, subtly, but undeniably. The friendliness drained out. The political charm dimmed. For the first time, I saw the real man underneath. Cold, calculated, entitled. "You're young," he said. "You don't understand how things work." "Explain it to me," I said, slowly, like I'm stupid. His jaw twitched. "You can't stop progress," he said. "This area needs development, needs leadership, needs vision." "And you're the visionary?" His smile sharpened. "Someone has to be." I stepped closer. "Not on my land." Harold didn't move, but the two construction foremen behind him subtly shifted, like they were ready to intervene. It was 3 against 1, and the bulldozers were rumbling softly, as if warming up. I felt suddenly, profoundly alone. Harold straightened his vest and lowered his voice, the tone men use before saying something they want no one else to hear. "Daniel, if you keep resisting, you're going to lose more than land." I froze. Is that a threat? I asked. He smiled. A prediction. The world seemed to tilt for a second, the sky too bright, the machines too loud, my pulse too fast. I realized then, Harold didn't just want my land. He wanted me gone, silenced, erased as an obstacle. That afternoon, as the crews waited for Harold's go-ahead, my neighbor, an older rancher named Bill Jensen, drove up on his quad. He killed the engine and walked over, chewing on a toothpick. "Heard construction on your land," he said casually. Didn't believe it till I saw it. "Bill, you got any idea what's going on?" He spat the toothpick into the dirt. "Yeah," he said. "I know exactly what's going on. Harold's been trying to buy everyone out. When they say no, well, things happen." "What kind of things?" Bill paused. Too long, too meaningfully. "You watch yourself," he said finally. "This guy ain't playing your game. He's playing his." Before he left, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "And Daniel, whatever you do, don't let them build that foundation. Once it's poured, the courts will side with him 9 times out of 10. That sentence hit me like a hammer. They weren't building a road. They weren't marking easements. They were clearing land to pour the foundation of the mansion. Time wasn't running out. It had already run out. That night, after the workers left, I walked the pasture again and found something worse than the blueprint. A spray-painted rectangle bright orange in the grass. The exact outline of the mansion's footprint. Right over the place where my father and I buried our old cattle dog when I was 12. I fell to my knees, and for the first time since Dad died, I cried until my throat burned, because this wasn't just construction anymore. This was desecration. The orange spray paint glowed under my flashlight like something radioactive, a bright, ugly rectangle carved right into the memory of my childhood. Right into the spot where my father crouched beside 12-year-old me and said, "Son, we bury people and animals with respect because the land remembers everything." Now that sacred patch of earth was labeled pool house. I wiped my face and forced myself to breathe, but every inhale felt like swallowing fire. The night was too quiet. No crickets, no wind. Even Ringo seemed uneasy, pacing back and forth beside me, ears pinned back. I whispered, "Dad, what do I do?" But I already knew the answer. I had to stop them. Whatever it took, the next morning, before the crew arrived, I went to the farm supply store and bought the biggest chain and padlock they sold. 3 times thicker than I needed, maybe 4. It felt like armor in my hands. When I got home, I wrapped the chain around the metal gate posts at the lower pasture and locked it, then reinforced the sides with old tractor parts and cinder blocks. Not pretty, but solid. The workers arrived at 7:30 a.m., right on schedule. They climbed out of their trucks and just stared at the blockade like it personally offended them. The foreman, big guy, beard, sunglasses, walked up to me. "What's the deal?" he asked. "The deal," I said, "is that this gate stays shut. No construction happens here until a judge tells me otherwise." He crossed his arms. "This is authorized work." "Show me the authorization." He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. He didn't have it. He'd been told he didn't need it. "These are your instructions," I said. "Stay off my land." He didn't argue again, not to me anyway. He just walked back to his truck and made a phone call. I already knew who he was calling. It took exactly 14 minutes. A white SUV appeared at the top of the hill. Behind it, to my surprise and worry, came a black pickup I didn't recognize. Harold stepped out first, immaculate as ever. No sweat, no dust, no hint he'd just rolled up to a construction standoff. The other man climbed out of the truck slower, sizing me up. Tall, broad shoulders, shaved head. A deep scar running across his jawline like a lightning strike. Harold noticed my stare. "This is Mr. Keller," he said, "a private security consultant." Security consultant. That was rich. The guy looked less like a consultant and more like a man who'd bury you in the desert if someone paid him enough. Harold approached the locked gate and touched the chain with 2 fingers like he expected it to recoil from him. "This is unnecessary," he said. "No," I replied, "this is overdue." He sighed theatrically. "Daniel, I've tried to be reasonable. You keep forcing my hand." "Good," I said. "Maybe it'll finally stop trembling." Mr. Keller stepped closer, too close. His voice was low, controlled. "You're escalating a situation that doesn't need escalating." I met his stare. "Back away from my gate." For several long seconds, none of us moved. The workers stayed in their trucks. Ringo growled softly beside me. Even the air felt tight. Harold finally broke the silence. "We have a permit," he said. "Show it." "It's being processed." "Then you don't have it." He clenched his jaw. "I'm giving you one last chance to open this gate voluntarily. And I'm giving you one last chance to leave my land." His face flushed pink, the first real crack in his politician mask. "You're going to regret this, Daniel." I stepped forward until we were inches apart. "No," I said quietly. "You are." Harold didn't try to force the gate that day. He wasn't stupid. He retreated, smoothed his vest, gave a little nod to Keller. Then he said the words that would define everything that came next. "Enjoy your moment. It won't last." They left. The bulldozers left. Silence returned, but the peace wasn't comforting. It was the calm before something big, something calculated, something cruel. I got my answer that evening. A white envelope was taped to my front door. No name. Just a typed address and a return label from a law firm in the city. Inside was a temporary injunction notice. They were suing me. Not for damage, not for interference. They were suing me for obstruction of authorized development, claiming I was illegally blocking construction approved by the county. But the worst part? The document included a county seal. I felt my stomach drop. My vision tunneled. Harold wasn't bluffing anymore. He'd gotten someone, one of the county officials, maybe more, to sign off on fraudulent paperwork. This wasn't just a land dispute, it was corruption, and now it was aimed directly at me. The injunction scheduled an emergency hearing for 3 days later, 3 days. 3 days to prove the land was mine, 3 days to gather documents, 3 days to hire an attorney, except I couldn't afford an attorney. Running a ranch alone doesn't leave piles of cash lying around. My savings had gone into repairs, feed, vet bills, keeping the place alive. I stood in my kitchen staring at the notice, hands trembling so violently I dropped the papers twice. "What do I do?" I whispered to nobody. Ringo nudged my leg. My father's voice echoed faintly in memory. "When you're cornered, you don't back down. You brace your feet and push back harder." He never lived to see a world where HOAs could weaponize the legal system. But he understood one truth. Bullies only win if you let fear freeze you. I knew one person who might help. Bill Jensen, the older rancher who warned me. I drove to his place, the gravel kicking up behind my tires. He was working on an old baler when I pulled up. "Bill," I said, "I need help." He wiped his hands on a rag, studied my face, and said, "They hit you with court papers?" I nodded. He nodded back, like he'd expected this all along. "Come on inside." He poured us coffee that tasted like burnt pine bark and handed me a folder thick with documents. "What's this?" "Proof," he said. "Survey maps, old deeds, land grants. I've been collecting them since this mess started hitting the area." "Why?" "Because you're not the first," he said. "And if you fall, you won't be the last." He leaned closer. "And Harold ain't just building mansions, he's building an empire." I opened the folder. Every document was meticulously labeled and cross-referenced. Bill had done homework I didn't even know needed doing. "You're not alone, son," he said. "Not anymore." I felt a lump form in my throat. Real, unexpected relief. It lasted about 5 seconds, because Bill added, "But you need more than paperwork. You need someone willing to stand up in court." "I don't have money for a lawyer," he smirked. "Didn't say lawyer." Bill gave me a name, Catherine Rowe, former county assessor, forced out 5 years earlier after she tried to expose irregularities in land development approvals. "She knows the system," Bill said, "and she hates Harold more than you do." I didn't think that was possible. I called her that night. Her voice was sharp, tired but alert. "I hear you've got a boundary problem," she said. "Text me the paperwork." I sent photos of everything. 30 seconds passed, then a minute, then 2. Finally, she replied, "This isn't a boundary problem, this is fraud." And then she wrote something that made my blood run cold. They've done this before. But this time, they picked the wrong landowner. The morning of the hearing arrived too fast. I hadn't slept. I'd memorized every document twice over. Bill showed up in a clean shirt and tie, the first time I'd ever seen him in anything other than denim. Catherine arrived 5 minutes before we went inside, holding a tablet and a stack of printed files. She looked at me and said, "Whatever happens today, do not lose your temper. They want you to snap. They're counting on it." "I won't," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Everyone says that." Then she put a hand on my shoulder. "But you've got truth on your side. That's more than Harold has had in years." When we walked into the courtroom and took our seats, Harold was already there. But he wasn't smiling, because sitting beside him wasn't a lawyer from town. It wasn't a lawyer from the city. It was a corporate attorney from a firm so expensive their hourly rate could feed my entire herd for a month. He looked at me like I was already defeated. And Harold leaned over and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "3 days wasn't enough for you, Daniel." But it was more than enough for me. Courtrooms are supposed to feel neutral, pale walls, hard benches, a scent somewhere between dust and disinfectant. But that morning, the room felt hostile the moment I walked in, like the walls themselves leaned toward Harold's side of the aisle. Harold sat smugly at his table, perfectly groomed, every hair shellacked into place. He didn't even pretend not to stare at me. His eyes tracked me the way a hawk tracks a rabbit, not because it's hungry, but because it already knows it's going to eat. The corporate lawyer next to him, a tall man with silver hair and a navy suit that probably cost more than my truck, looked bored. Like this entire hearing was a minor annoyance he'd soon eliminate. Catherine sat beside me, tapping a pen so quickly her hand blurred. "You ready?" she asked. "No," I admitted, "but let's do it anyway." She cracked a faint, approving smile. Judge Melton entered, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a posture that suggested he'd heard every kind of nonsense the world could throw at him. "Court is now in session," the clerk announced. Our case was first. "Good. Rip the bandage off." The judge looked at the file in front of him. "This is an emergency injunction requested by the Sage Creek Estates Homeowners Association against Mr. Daniel Rivers." Hearing my name in that room made my stomach flip. The judge continued, "The HOA claims Mr. Rivers is interfering with authorized development on property now owned by Sage Creek." Owned. That word hit me like a brick to the chest. Not claimed, not disputed, not under review. Owned. Harold glanced over at me and smiled. "Your Honor," the corporate attorney began, stepping forward smoothly, "the HOA has obtained legitimate approval for construction on a parcel now incorporated into Sage Creek Estates. Mr. Rivers has unlawfully obstructed crews from performing authorized work." Authorized. There it was again. He held up a stack of papers clipped neatly together. "Here is the boundary adjustment filed with the county office 2 months ago, granting Sage Creek expansion rights." Catherine leaned toward me. "That's impossible," she whispered. But the judge accepted the papers, studied them. nodded. My chest tightened. The lawyer continued. We request the court order Mr. Rivers to remove all blockades immediately, cease interference, and allow construction to proceed without delay. He spoke like he already owned the verdict. Maybe he did. Catherine stood. Her voice was steady, but I heard the strain under it. Your Honor, the document they presented is fraudulent. My client's property boundaries have remained unchanged for 5 decades. We have the original deed, supplemental surveys, county maps, and land records confirming. Do you have proof the submitted document is fraudulent? The judge interrupted. We're still investigating. Then your claim is speculative. The gavel of reality hit me harder than any wooden one ever could. The judge wouldn't act on suspicion. He needed undeniable evidence. We didn't have that, not yet. Catherine inhaled sharply. Your Honor, this injunction aims to rush construction so that even if fraud is proven later, the damage will be irreversible. The judge looked at her like he'd heard that argument 10,000 times. Emotional arguments won't suffice, he said. My heart sank. I felt the crisis closing in inch by inch. Then the judge turned to me. Mr. Rivers, do you have anything to add? My throat tightened. The whole courtroom blurred, not from tears, but from how hard my heart was pounding. I forced myself to breathe. Your Honor, I said quietly, that land is my family. My father worked every inch of it. He died on that land. I'm not fighting to be stubborn. I'm fighting to keep something sacred. The room was dead still, but Harold's lawyer stepped forward smoothly, flawlessly. Objection to emotional appeal. Sustained, the judge said. Stick to facts. Facts. That word echoed like a taunt, because Harold had fake ones, and I had real ones that weren't enough. After reviewing both sides, and by reviewing, I mean skimming through the HOA's polished papers and barely glancing at mine, the judge leaned back in his seat. His decision was already made. I could feel it. Based on the documentation presented, he said, the court grants the temporary injunction. Mr. Rivers is ordered to remove all obstructions and allow construction to proceed. My heart hollowed out. Harold exhaled slowly, triumph radiating off him like heat. The judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, if Mr. Rivers continues to interfere, he may be held in contempt, leading to fines and possible jail time. My breath caught. Jail time? Jail? For protecting my own land. I felt something inside me crumble. When the gavel struck, it sounded exactly like my father's hammer hitting the old barn beams, except this time, it wasn't building anything. It was destroying it. Harold caught my eye as people began to rise. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His smirk said enough. Catherine packed her papers with shaking hands. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I nodded. Couldn't speak. We walked out of the courthouse, the cold air hitting me like a slap. Bill stood outside waiting for us. Well? He asked. I couldn't answer. I just stared at the ground. Catherine answered for me. It didn't go our way. Bill swore under his breath and kicked a pebble hard enough to send it skittering across the pavement. What now? I asked softly. Catherine put a hand on my arm. We appeal. We gather real evidence. We find the source of the fraud. But Daniel, she hesitated. They're going to start construction immediately. I swallowed painfully. That means the foundation, I said. She nodded. Once it's poured, it's almost impossible to reverse. Impossible. The word echoed in my skull. I drove home in a haze, barely remembering the turns. When I reached the hill overlooking my lower pasture, I saw the dust clouds before I even saw the machines. They hadn't wasted a minute. 3 bulldozers, 2 excavators. A cement truck staged and waiting. Workers were hammering markers into the ground so aggressively it sounded like gunshots. The scent of fresh-turned dirt hit me like a wave. Harold's SUV was parked exactly where it was the first time I confronted him, like he wanted to watch my destruction up close. When I stepped out of my truck, Ringo growled, sensing my rage before I felt the full weight of it. Harold approached me with forced sympathy, as fake as everything else about him. "Tough day in court," he said softly. "Go to hell," I whispered. He leaned in. "No, Daniel, I'm going home. To the home that will soon sit right here." He tapped his foot on the ground where the pool house outline was sprayed. "On my dog's grave. On my memories." I felt something rupture inside me. My lungs tightened. My vision tunneled. I wasn't thinking anymore. I was breaking. "You can't do this," I said weakly. He smiled. "I already am." The bulldozers roared to life. The ground shook, dust billowed, my ears rang. One of the machines began ripping into the soil near the pecan grove, the grove my dad planted with me, one sapling at a time. I could still hear his voice from that day. "Take care of these trees, they'll outlive us both." Now they were treating those trees like weeds. I stepped forward instinctively, but two workers intercepted me. "Sir, you need to stay back." "This is my land," I shouted. "Not according to the paperwork," one said, not even looking at me. And that was the moment my knees gave out. I fell in the dirt. Hands sinking into the soil my father worked. The bulldozers kept moving. Harold kept watching. And I felt utterly, completely powerless. A scream clawed up from inside me, but it never made it out. It just dissolved somewhere between my chest and throat, swallowed by the machines devouring my life. I watched a tree go down, a pecan tree Dad planted when I was 5. It cracked like a bone snapping. I can still hear it. I didn't remember driving to the house. I didn't remember walking inside. I only remember sitting on the kitchen floor, dirt on my jeans, dust on my face, hands trembling uncontrollably. Ringo lay beside me, pressing his body against mine. That was the moment I broke. But it was also the moment something new sparked. Faint, fragile, barely there. A spark that whispered, "Get up. This isn't over." I don't know how long I sat on that kitchen floor. The windows were dark by the time I finally stood, legs numb, heart heavier than the soil outside. I splashed water on my face and stared at the man in the mirror. Red eyes, dust-caked shirt. A hollow expression I barely recognized. I whispered, "Dad, I'm losing everything." But somewhere under the grief, under the exhaustion, something simmered. Something sharper than fear. Something almost dangerous. Not violence, not revenge, determination, a fire I'd forgotten I had, the same fire my father carried every day of his life. I exhaled slowly and wiped my face. "Okay," I whispered to my reflection. "If they want to fight, they'll get one." The next morning, Catherine called. "You alive?" she asked. "Barely." "Good enough," she said, "because we're not done." Her voice carried something I hadn't heard yesterday, strategy. She wasn't defeated. She was calculating. "We need proof," she said. "Not suspicions, not assumptions, hard evidence." I rubbed my aching temples. "Evidence of what?" "Fraud," she said plainly. "And corruption, and collusion between the HOA and someone at the county office." I swallowed. "That's a lot to prove." "Good thing we're stubborn," she said. Then her voice softened. "Daniel, if you give up now, you lose everything. Not just the land, the truth." I knew she was right, so I said the words that started everything. "What do you need me to do?" Catherine came out to the ranch that afternoon with a laptop, 2 binders, and a look that could scare a judge into sitting up straighter. She walked the property with me, taking photos, scanning papers, muttering to herself as she pieced things together. Then she crouched by the spray-painted rectangle, the mansion footprint, and traced her fingers across it like an archaeologist examining a crime scene. "They moved fast," she said. "Too fast." "What do you mean?" "This level of construction doesn't happen 3 hours after a hearing unless everything was already lined up." She looked up at me. "That means the judge's decision didn't change their schedule. It confirmed it." A cold chill slid down my spine. "You're saying they already knew the judge would rule in their favor?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Later that night in my kitchen, she spread documents across the table. "Look here," she said, tapping the boundary adjustment Harold's lawyer submitted. "The signature." The county official's signature looked right at first glance, but Catherine zoomed in. "This is copied," she said, "digitally pasted onto the form. See the pixel noise? The baseline distortions?" I stared. "So it's a forgery?" "Almost definitely. But almost isn't good enough. We need the original." "And how do we get that?" I asked. She smirked. "We ask nicely." We went back to the county office the next morning. Linda, the clerk who warned me before, looked even more stressed than last time. Her shoulders stiffened when she saw us. "Daniel, you need to be careful coming here," she whispered. "We need the original boundary adjustment request," Catherine said, firm and direct. Linda's lips compressed. "I told you, there is no boundary adjustment." "Then we need the proof of that," Catherine said. "We need the official logbook." Linda hesitated long enough to make my stomach twist. Then she looked toward the back office, where higher-ups worked, and quietly motioned for us to follow her into a side room. She shut the door. "This could cost me my job," she said. "It could save his land," Catherine replied. Linda swallowed hard, then unlocked a metal cabinet. She pulled out a thick binder full of handwritten entries, requests filed, approvals submitted, dates logged. She flipped through pages rapidly, then stopped. "Here," she said. "This is the date they claim to have filed the paperwork." The page was blank. Completely blank. "No entry?" I asked. "No request," she said. "Nothing. Not even a pending note." Catherine exhaled sharply. "That's it," she muttered. "That's the break." She snapped photos of the page, timestamp and all. "Thank you," I told Linda. She gripped my arm. "Be careful. If someone forged county documents, they won't let this go quietly." Her warning echoed in my head long after we left. Word spread fast in small towns. By the time we drove back to the ranch, 3 neighbors were waiting at my gate. Bill Jensen, Mrs. Whitaker from down the road, and a young couple I barely knew. "We heard what they're doing to you," Mrs. Whitaker said, eyes blazing. "Ain't right." The younger man nodded. "They tried to expand onto our land last year. We couldn't afford to fight." "But you can," Bill added. "And if you can prove Harold's dirty, maybe we can get justice too." The wind picked up, rustling the dead grass. I felt something stir inside me. Not fear, not rage. Hope. "We're with you," Bill said. "All of us." The community was rallying. For the first time, Harold wasn't just up against one stubborn rancher. He was up against everyone he'd stepped on. As we talked, a construction truck rolled past, slowly, deliberately, the driver glaring at us. He wasn't subtle. "Intimidation," Catherine said under her breath. "But intimidation goes both ways. Because the more they pushed, the more people leaned my way." Later that evening, Harold made a mistake. A big one. He sent an email to all Sage Creek homeowners claiming county approval had been finalized months earlier and accusing me of violently interfering with legal development. Violently. Except I hadn't touched anyone. Catherine read the email twice, then looked at me with a slow, satisfied smile. "He just implicated himself," she said. "He set a timeline that doesn't match the county records." "That enough?" I asked. "Not yet, but it's a pattern, and courts love patterns." She began assembling a case, stacking evidence, connecting dots. I watched her work for hours at my kitchen table. Papers spread everywhere, coffee cups piling up. Her determination sharpening. "You know," I said quietly, "you didn't have to take this on." She paused, looked at me. "Yes," she said, "I did." 2 days later, long after dark, my phone buzzed. Unknown. Number. Check the HOA storage unit off Route 11. You'll find what you're looking for. Be quick. Don't be seen. My breath hitched. "Catherine," I said, "we got something." She arrived within 15 minutes, still in pajamas and slippers, hair in a messy bun, holding a flashlight like a weapon. "You sure this isn't a trap?" she asked. "No," I admitted, "but if there's evidence, Harold won't leave it lying around his house," she sighed. "Fine, let's go." The Sage Creek HOA had a storage unit on the edge of town, a metal row of units with faded blue doors and a single flickering light overhead. We parked far away, walked in silence. The gravel crunched under our boots. I had the code from a past HOA newsletter someone forwarded me months earlier. I typed it in, 0401 number sign. The lock clicked open. The smell hit first, dust, old paint, cardboard. Then the sight, boxes, old binders, stacks of documents, a metal filing cabinet in the back, and on top of it, a folder labeled, Catherine's breath caught. "This is it," she whispered. I opened the folder. Inside were printed drafts of the exact boundary adjustment form Harold submitted, all with different dates, mismatched signatures, mismatched seals. A forgery workshop. Proof? Proof powerful enough to destroy everything Harold built. Catherine grabbed her phone and took photos from every angle. "This wins your appeal," she said. "And it does more than that." I swallowed hard. "What?" "This opens a criminal investigation." We stepped out of the storage unit, adrenaline pounding. The night air was cold. Too cold. Then we heard it, the crunch of gravel behind us. A door slammed. A flashlight beam snapped on. A voice yelled, "Hey, who's there?" Catherine's fingers tightened around my arm. We weren't alone, and Harold's empire wasn't going to fall quietly. The flashlight beam cut through the dark like a blade. For one terrifying second, I thought it was Harold, or Keller, or some unknown enforcer Harold had sent to protect his vault of forged documents. But the man stepping forward wasn't Harold. It was one of the Sage Creek homeowners, a younger guy I'd seen mowing his yard when I drove by their subdivision. He was breathing hard like he'd sprinted to catch us. "Wait," he said, lowering the light. "Don't run. I'm not here to stop you." Catherine's grip on my arm didn't loosen. "What do you want?" I asked. He took a step closer, hands raised. I'm the one who texted you, the anonymous message." My pulse thundered. "Why?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "Because what Harold is doing is wrong. He thinks he owns us. He threatens people. If we oppose him, he fines us, harasses us, sends letters to our employers. He's ruined people." He glanced nervously at the dark parking lot. "I'm helping you because I'm tired of being afraid." The fear in his voice wasn't subtle. It was carved into him. Catherine softened slightly. "Your name?" "Ryan," he said. "Please, get that folder out of here before he realizes it's missing." Catherine nodded once, decisive. "Let's go." We rushed back to the truck, locking the evidence inside my glove box. Ryan disappeared as fast as he appeared, jogging back toward the road like a man who'd committed treason. And in a way, he had. He'd betrayed Harold. He'd chosen truth over fear. I didn't know it then, but that choice would change everything. The next morning, Catherine filed an appeal with the district court, a higher court with a judge not tied to the local county politics that Harold had infected. Bill drove us to the district courthouse in his old Ford, the heater wheezing warm air onto the windshield. I held the folder in my lap like it was a beating heart. Catherine walked into the clerk's office like a storm. Focused, fast, unstoppable. She submitted the evidence, the photos, the duplicate signatures, the blank county log pages, and even an affidavit from Linda. The clerk scanned through our stack of documents, eyebrows rising slowly. "This is substantial," she said. "Fraudulent boundary adjustment," Catherine replied, "multiple forgeries, misrepresentation to the court, possible collusion with a county official." The clerk turned pale. "I'll fast-track this," she said. "You'll hear back soon." Soon ended up being 48 hours. 2 days later, we got the call. "Your emergency appeal has been accepted," the clerk told us. "A stay has been issued. All construction must halt immediately." Those 4 words hit me like a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for weeks. Construction must halt. I walked outside and stared at the pecan grove, battered, broken, but standing. The machines were silent, workers gone. Harold's SUV absent for the first morning in weeks. The wind rustled through the leaves like applause. But the fight wasn't over yet. The big hearing, the one that could change everything, was set for the following Friday. I expected an empty room, a quiet dispute. But when I walked in with Catherine and Bill, the courtroom was already half full. Neighbors, old ranchers, local business owners, people from Sage Creek who finally felt safe enough to stand against Harold. And Ryan, sitting in the back, hood up, hands clasped so tight they turned white. I sat down, stunned. "Looks like your story spread," Catherine whispered. "Or Harold made one too many enemies," Bill grumbled. I didn't know which it was, but seeing those people I barely knew, people harmed by the same force that targeted me, it made something powerful rise inside my chest. I wasn't standing alone anymore. When Harold entered, he looked different, less polished, less composed. Keller was nowhere to be seen, which told me everything I needed to know about loyalty built on money instead of respect. Harold's corporate lawyer followed him, flipping through a thin folder, far thinner than ours. That alone felt like a victory. Harold glanced around the courtroom and froze for a fraction of a second when he realized how many people were watching. His confidence faltered, but only for a moment. Then he smoothed his vest, lifted his chin, and took his seat. This judge was not Melton, not the tired, cynical man who brushed off my evidence. Judge Alvarez was sharp-eyed, alert, and carried herself like someone who read every line before making a decision. "Let's begin," she said. Harold's lawyer went first. He argued the same points as before: boundary adjustments, authorized development, community benefit, but without the same swagger he'd shown in the previous hearing. This judge interrupted him constantly. "Where is the original filing? Why is the signature inconsistent? Why does the county logbook show no entry?" The lawyer stumbled, sweated, stammered. It was beautiful. Then it was our turn. Catherine approached the bench and handed over our compiled evidence, tabbed, highlighted, cross-referenced. "The boundary shift is falsified," she said. "These are drafts found in the HOA storage unit showing multiple attempts to forge signatures. We also have evidence that no such request exists in the official county records." She held up the photos. The judge stared at them for a long time. "And this folder was obtained how?" she asked. "Anonymous tip," Catherine said. "Provided voluntarily. We verified authenticity." The judge nodded slowly, then turned to Harold. "Mr. Whitford," she said, "would you like to explain these documents?" Harold's face drained of all color. I don't know where those came from," he stuttered. "They're fake, fabricated, someone trying to sabotage me." Catherine didn't flinch. "Your Honor," she said, "if I may." She clicked a button on her tablet. A projector screen lit up. The email. The one Harold sent to the Sage Creek community, claiming the boundary adjustment had been finalized months ago. The judge read the timestamp. Then she looked at Harold again, harder this time. "Your email contradicts your filing date," she said. "Care to explain?" Harold opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. The courtroom murmured. The tension shifted. The tide turned. And for the first time in this whole ordeal, I saw fear in Harold's eyes. Judge Alvarez took a long moment before speaking. Then, "This court finds that the documents submitted by the HOA are inconsistent, likely fraudulent, and materially misleading." A gasp rippled through the room. "Effective immediately," the judge continued, "the injunction is lifted. Construction is to cease indefinitely. The property in question remains under full ownership of Mr. Daniel Rivers." My knees nearly buckled, but she wasn't finished. "I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation into potential fraud, forgery, and abuse of authority." Harold's lawyer sat perfectly still, staring down at the table like he hoped the wood would swallow him whole. Harold looked like someone had yanked out his spine. The judge's final words echoed through the courtroom. "This court will not tolerate corruption disguised as community development." The gavel fell, and everything I'd been fighting for, everything my father built, was finally safe. News spread faster than wildfire. Within a week, Harold resigned as HOA president. The county began investigating forged documents. Homeowners filed a petition to dissolve the HOA board entirely. 2 county employees were suspended pending investigation. And Harold's mansion plans? Completely dead. He tried to save face, held a meeting blaming rogue contractors and miscommunication. But no one bought it. Not after the truth came out. Not after his empire crumbled under the weight of its own lies. The next morning, after the verdict, I walked down to the pecan grove. Sunlight filtered through the branches. Dust from the construction still clung to the leaves, but the trees were standing, stubborn, resilient, alive, just like my father. I knelt in the grass and placed my hand on the soil, the same soil Harold tried to steal, the same soil that held the memories of my father, my childhood, and everything that shaped me. The land did remember, and now it would remember victory too. People think justice is loud, courtroom shouting, dramatic confessions, big victories. But real justice? It's quiet. It's the sound of bulldozers leaving and never coming back. It's the relief of a neighbor who no longer lives in fear. It's the moment you realize you didn't just win for yourself. You won for everyone watching. Everyone who felt powerless, everyone who thought fighting back wasn't worth it. I didn't just save the land. I helped expose a man who'd been hurting people for years. Sometimes transformation isn't about becoming something new. Sometimes it's remembering who you were before fear tried to break you. A month later, I stood on my porch, watching the sunrise spill golden light over the fields. Ringo lay at my feet, tail thumping softly. I whispered into the morning air, "Dad, I kept my promise." The wind moved through the pecan trees, gentle, warm, almost like an answer. And I realized something. Justice isn't what the court gives you. It's what you fight for when no one else will. If you're reading this, tell me, what does justice mean to you?